So I'll start with my short talk. I would like to thank Ivana and you all for inviting me, for having me here. I'm flattered to be at such a recognized institution, and I hope that you will get something out of my presentation, maybe some thoughts, or as we are in a very small group, so well, don't hesitate to jump in and ask if you are interested in anything, because like yesterday I had a presentation on similar topic for bachelor students, so I took it more story-like and more basic. As you are experienced researchers, I will sometimes be quicker in the basics and go more into like knowledge or theory, but just feel free to jump in and ask me, because you are from various disciplines, some more or less connected to what I will be talking about, so your knowledge might be in depth in different areas. So I'm coming from Prague University of Economics of Business, which is a recognized business school. It's a university specialized on business and management. I come from Faculty of Management, and we have 5 other faculties like Business Administration, National Studies, Information and Statistics, and so on. So, my main topic, I'm organizational researcher, and my hard topic, which I study for more than a decade, is organizational transparency. And today I will show you something, because you are from political studies, so my presentation will conclude with some policy implications, how to ensure transparency. And before that, I will just explain why transparency is important and how it can benefit or how it can even harm. So I'll start with my first study, which I did first as part of my PhD study, and this was a governance study. I was studying sport governance because my background is in management. I studied management. I also studied physical education in sport as a master studies, and then I studied PhD in management, but on sport governance. And this is a model of governance structure of national sport organizations, because what I found that generally an Anglo-Saxon model, which is in the top right corner and described in all codes of good governance, is much more complicated in our national sport organizations. And what I also find that it has a different requirements on transparency. And one of the, well, this is a citation from the 2014 paper which I wrote, is, and I made 2 examples out of more than 60 sport organizations I studied, that Czech tennis federations has problems with little like undermine organizational legitimacy, and that is strongly dependent on a single person, and there is a high risk for the organization. And I wrote it in, like, I did this study in 2011 and 2012, and I wrote it in 2014. And also another conclusion, which is quotation, that the general limitation is in perceived low transparency of Czech sport organizations. And now I will give you a story after 10 years. After 10 years of publishing this paper, there was, this is from Czech News, you can see March 2024, and the head of Czech Tennis Federation was detained for fraud. And also, like, he had been in charge in the organization for more than 25 years. And the governance was really tight around him. He even implemented in the statutes that the president of the federation is Ivo Kaderka. His name was in the statutes, which is like more and more executive concentration. Finally, they had to repay more than 77 million Czech crowns, which is almost half a billion of dinners. It's around dinners, like it's 400. It's more than 400 million of dinners, which is like what the amount of fraud, and it's really serious for the Czech Tennis Federation. So I know that you have the best tennis player in the world, but our tennis was also pretty successful, and during this period, our tennis was like really successful. We won 3 times Davis Cup in a row, even once against Serbia, I think. So generally, like, it was a very successful sport organization. However, like, there was a backstory of frauds, and it was a lack of transparency. The second example, and everyone have seen it again, it's football. Well, you are big fans of football. We are big fans of football, and this is the new headquarters of Czech Football Association. It was opened in 2015, and the glass should evoke transparency. It was even like promoted. Well, it will be transparent football, and there was even Michel Platini cutting the ribbon, and the middleman is Miroslav Pelta, who was the head of the president. However, in 2017, in 2 years, there was a big police investigation. He was again put into detention, and after years and years, he was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison for clientelism in public subsidies. So, and again, like, the transparency was only like pretentious, but there were no transparency. So I will briefly introduce what is organizational transparency. And I prepared few definitions that evoked over the times. The first is logically from Transparency International, which is pretty dense, but it says that, if I say it shortly, it's shedding light of rules, and it's just knowing what people do and which are in charge of organizations, whether it's public or private organizations, but all the stakeholders should know what the people do, how they do, and should know clearly what they do. Also, generally, it's a freely available information about working of the organizations, and one which is very short, but it was published in the Journal of Management, and it was a result of a big and extensive review, is that it's a perceived quality of intentionally shared information from a sender, with each word having a very important standings. Like, the perceived means that it's not about just what we publish, but how you as stakeholders perceive that. Also, intentionally shared, that means that, like, organization intentionally share information, and I will get to that definition a bit later with the dimensions. And generally, what is transparency? Transparency is the most prevalent principle of good governance. One researcher, or a group of researchers from Switzerland, made a big or large examination of all codes of good governance, and they found that transparency is the most prevalent principle, and it appears in more than 80% of codes of good governance. However, on the other hand, and I'm getting to the examples Ivana already explained, is lack of transparency is one of the major causes of the largest corporate scandals. And one of them is Enron. I don't know whether you are familiar with Enron. Okay, some of you are. So it was in 2001, in 2001, it was the largest bankruptcy in the US of all times. And it was because of financial frauds that should cover the weak performance of the organization, and it culminated, and in 2001 it just broke up, and there was like the revenues was about 100 billions of US dollars. And well, it took only a year to be surpassed by WorldCon, another unsuccessful company that like just made some frauds and falsifying accounting documents, and it surpassed Enron again. So as a result of these causes, the US government issued its so-called Sarbanes-Oxley Act for reporting standards on organizations. So, well, it should have been okay, but another cause, I don't know whether you know the affair called Dieselgate in the US. So it was in 2015, and what preceded? Volkswagen entered the US market around, like you can see, 2009, and they wanted to promote diesel engines. But the US have different measures of pollutions than we do in Europe. They have different requirements. We are mostly on CO2, they have on NOx. So it was one problem. And the second problem was just the customers didn't want it. So they promoted that the diesel is clean, and they promised, well, we will provide diesel engine which is cleaner than any of the petrol engines. And well, as they promised, they couldn't deliver. So what they found, that they implemented a cheating software. Also because the US has a different method of measuring pollution. In Europe, we have laboratory tests. They have so-called real life tests. But still, the real life test has some protocol, and the software in the car could recognize, wow, now I am being tested. So the software, when recognized it's being tested, switched to a different mode to produce less emissions. Of course, at the expense of power, and so generally it was a big fraud, and a lot of managers in Volkswagen must have known about it, but it couldn't leak out, despite it was really prevalent. So generally, how it ended up? It ended up with the big accusations. So far, well, it was in 2015, and only last year or so, some managers were sentenced to serious to imprisonment or something. But again, it was like a huge impulse for being more transparent. And as I told you, I'm from sport, so you probably know another affairs from sport, and even Football Association, World Football Association, or even International Olympic Committee had some affairs because of low transparency of the Olympic bids and or World Champions bids. So this shows that transparency is a big issue. And this is a search in Web of Science, which I did in August last year. So we can see the last year, 2025, is higher, but it's in August. So if I made it yesterday or the day before yesterday, it would be much higher. So I will probably do it to show it more, but generally it shows how transparency is more important. And this is only in the categories of business and management, in the category of business and management. In other categories, it grows up. For example, ESG transparency, it's skyrocketed. And what I love, that even in 2017, Ethan Bernstein wrote in his paper in Academy of Management Annals that transparency is going to be like one of the great themes in management theory today. So I've already used it in several of my papers just to show the significance of the topic. And getting back to what it is. So generally, transparency used to be linked only to disclosure, providing information. If you provide information, you are transparent. If not, you are not transparent. However, disclosing information doesn't mean to be transparent. What the US companies often did when they were asked, you must publish something. So what they did, they published something and hide it in a pile of thousands of pages. Okay, and make yourself comfortable and find it if you want. Which will be in the age of AI, it will be even possible to publish even more. But on the other hand, it will be possible to detract more. So generally, it adds a new dimension. And also, like, not only publishing, but it means about quality, about understandability, like law jargon or management jargon or technical details. You can hide interesting, like important information in the loads of specialized jargon. So it's also important to be understandable and also reliable, that like the information are real and you can rely that if they report this measure, it's based on the numbers that should be calculated for. So generally there are 3 dimensions of transparency which are more recognized. First is disclosure, of course we need to disclose. Second is clarity, and that means I will explain these dimensions right now. So, and the third is accuracy. So generally the question is, are the information available? Second is, and means that it's available. Where do we expect it? In the time we expect it, and in a like form we expect it. Should be a report. Okay, it will be a report. And I used also some examples, or I prepared examples. And it's a topical thing. You might have heard about European new directive on reporting pay transparency. It's a new European Union directive which will come into, which will be valid from the next year, I think. Should be implemented, and it's about reporting certain amounts of pay data, just with the intention to reduce pay gap, like gender pay gap or other inequalities. So on this example, this means like if the disclosure is high, the organization publish the data. If the disclosure is low, they either don't publish, just don't publish anything, or publish it too late, or through the means that are not accessible, like under some passwords or anything. And then we go to another dimensions, which is clarity. And this means, is it understandable? Could the stakeholders, the receivers, understand it? Not only the sender, they say, well, it's clear. No, is it clear to the people I am sending it? And it's about lucidity, coherence, and comprehensibility. For example, for the gender data or for the pay data, it would be like clarity. If the company discloses what they pay, so I, as an employee or potential employee, can see, okay, if I get promoted, I am likely to have such an increase. The example from the US universities, where I spent some time, is they are obliged to disclose the pay range. So when I was at the Denver University, I saw an advertisement for a position, and it was like from $160,000 to $180,000 a year, which is very understandable for me. I really knew what I could, for example, aim for. However, there were some universities that published, you can expect from 50 to 200. Okay, so I don't know anything. They publish, like they disclose, but the clarity is low, because like, yeah, that's possible, but really is that so high? But no, they just published what they had to, but it wasn't clear. So, or it could be some hidden in or obfuscated in jargon or so. And the last is accuracy. That means like, are the data or the numbers real? Do we count it real? Like reliable? Is it correct? Because it's possible to make it clear, make it understandable, but wrong numbers. And how could be, there are various tactics how to use wrong numbers. And for example, for the pay, it's like correct is like, it's clear. For example, the organization will have to report on gender pay gap. And last week there was statistics from our country, and we are kind of leading because we have one of the highest pay gap in the European Union, which is 18.5%, which means only because of gender, the average salary on certain positions is lower by 18% for women than men. And however, it could be also made differently. Like if I want to report it, okay, I will report only full-time people who are on full-time contract but not part-time. But on the other hand, women are mostly on part-time because of maternity. So generally, I will not count this part. I will only full-time. So which is, I will make it clear. I will disclose it, but it will not be correct because I will skip some numbers that will screw or bias the final result. So that is accuracy. So this is what transparency is, and we are getting to whether we need it. I already described, and generally there are huge societal impacts, and on the examples I've already gave is that generally it prevents corruption and frauds, because like once you can see some hands, so you don't have to. It's really difficult to make frauds if people see what you are doing. If they don't see what you are doing, it's easier. Also, it reduces market inequality and gender pay gap and all the gaps, because like if we know what the others can do, we can ask why I'm not receiving that money. Is it because my expertise, or is it because like I'm not in favor with the boss? The first is okay, the second is not okay. And also reducing information asymmetry, because like it's one of the assumptions of the free market is that the information are available. If there is asymmetry, the free market doesn't work. And also they are reported, and I didn't use the references, but if you are interested, I have the references, I can provide them, or they are in some of my papers. And first is general, like building trust of all stakeholders. It's like in your life, if you are transparent and you report, so you are acquiring slowly and slowly more and more trust, because people know that they can rely on you, because what you say is what they see. Also, there is evidence on strengthening investor confidence, that investors, if they see what the organization do that, they can invest more, and so. Also, it has a good impact on customers, because customers, when they see when the organization is transparent, they are able to retain or to spend more and to be more loyal. Another, like, it's a lowering cost of capital. It's also for more transparent organization. There is evidence that they have cheaper loans and so. Also, what even I found in my research, for non-profits, the more transparent organization can acquire more resources from either membership, because the members are willing to pay more if they see how the money are spent, instead of if they don't. The same is for charities and so. And also, it facilitates organizational change. And there is also, like, from the organizational research, that employees of transparent organization are more engaged. But also, well, it seems like transparency is a panacea, like a one silver bullet that you will implement and everything will be good. But it's not there. The more I am in transparency, I can see more negative or maybe more paradoxical outcomes. And there are also like negative consequences. For example, like reducing strategic protection. Like if we have some know-how or some practices, so if we have to reveal everything, it's much easier to copy it. Like if I reveal all the documents of my production, it's much easier for any competitor here or elsewhere in the world just to make a copy. And if they have cheaper labor, they can very easily copy. Also, there is a exposure to stakeholder backslash. It's also from my research, I realized, well, stakeholders may be more receptive to some information which are generally correct, but not according to stakeholders. For example, in my research, I found that people our sport organization cannot are really have fear of publishing labor research because they were convinced that if they publish what people earn, although it's a really small money, stakeholders will react. Or marketing. Well, why do you spend for marketing? You don't need marketing. So to defend for non-profit organization, for example, marketing, can also have backslash. Or there are even companies in the US and large companies who acquired certification in environmental, social, and governmental responsibility, some ESG awards. It's a big award to have, and they decided not to publish it. Why? Because, for example, previously they were accused from some breakage, some misconduct. So they assumed that if they publish it, they will be accused of greenwashing, like you are only pretending, it's just fake. So they just acquired a recognized award and they didn't publish it. So it's because of there can be also a backslash. Also in paid transparency, like paid transparency is a really double-edged sword because on the one hand it may reduce inequality and so on the other hand there are many undesirable outcomes. For example, one of them is cooperation, and I explained it yesterday. Like if we are colleagues and Ivana is my colleague, and I know that she earns more than me, and she asks me to help her, I will think, oh well, maybe not, because like she earns more, she can do it by herself. If you don't know, well, maybe it's so it could be also backslash in that. Also, there are like reputational legitimacy risk. For example, if they are too open and they want to be truth, okay, we are not good in environment, but stakeholders it may attract attention to undesired things that the company, for example, builds. Like Nike was one of the first companies to publish environmental impact. But of course, it wasn't perfect because they produced in China, and stakeholders all of a sudden, okay, well, but look at these numbers. But it was way better than the competition, which didn't disclose the numbers. But, well, it attracted attention to that undesired things. So generally, there are risks even just attracting attention. And also, it depends, and we are getting to your on the societal and institutional environment. And my favorite example is from Russia. And there was a big and really thorough study in the Journal of Finance that showed that in Russia, the less transparent and more corrupt CEOs run, or that leads to more success in business. Generally, high transparency and low corruption led to worse performance. Why? Because the institution doesn't reward transparency, it rewards the crooks. So it's also and that's the dependency. So and now I'm going to the question which I posed in the title, which is, so how can we ensure the transparency and how can we make organization transparent in a way that will be beneficial for the organization and for the society, that there won't be the backslash. So I'll start with the analysis I did, and this is only assumption or just a springboard for me, because as I was studying more and more transparency, I was finding the studies. For example, this is a general organization characteristics, and for each of them, you can see each of them, I found a study that found a positive effect. For example, here. The higher is the larger is the organization, the more is transparent. But I found, well, that's true, but that's not true. That's reverse, or there is no effect. The same was a financial performance or non-financial performance. Well, is it a determinant or is it not a determinant? Funding, government funding, it would be logic. Like the organization that receives public funding should be more transparent, right? Well, no. I found, of course, many studies that confirm it, but even one of my studies found that it's reverse. And I will explain why. Or it's not. Leverage that means the ratio of debts to total capital. So let's make it easy. The more debts, the more loans, the more transparency. Because, well, banks will probably require. But it's also not true. It can be true, it cannot be true, or it's just independent. And also like environmental sensitivity, maybe, but it's not consistent. Also, because I started with corporate governance or governance thing, so most of the studies focus on governance variables, like board size, saying that the more members we have in board, the more transparent will be the organization. Well, again, it's not that like board diversity, the more diversity, okay, again, that's not consistent. Board independence, also not consistent. Foreign ownership, well, yeah, again, we could find study that it's not, or it's independent, or external audit. We would expect that just auditing must make organization more transparent, but also there are studies that show that, well, it's reverse, or, well, there is no relation. So this made me thinking about like how we can impact transparency. And generally, one of my studies I did on the Czech organization, it was the follow-up study on the governance structures, I was searching for the determinants, and I will start with these structural determinants. And what I found, just team or individual sports is independent, board size is independent, like significance of sport, how large and recognized is the sport, it's like there is very, very low dependence. What I found, and this was one of the surprising opening for me, that Olympic sports, which receive much higher state subsidies, like, and these are 3 levels of transparency I developed: low transparency, quasi-transparency, like pretending and somehow transparent, and transparent. So moving to full transparency for Olympic was very improbable. This is a very high coefficient in logistic regression. So it's ordinal logistic regression. So generally, if I say, it's very likely that Olympic sports will be less transparent than non-Olympic, although they receive much more subsidies, like 2, 3 or more times. And well, there is slight correlation or slight on the size of.
Excuse me, can you say that the more important they are for the country, the less there is less transparency or something like that?
Yes, I can say it's so. Well, the importance is kind of
in the sense of national pride and something that is.
Yeah. Well, we have also like some non-Olympic that could be like recognized as important and are big, but generally, like, even because Olympic sport, for example, even bobsleigh is Olympic sport, but the membership of bobsleighs is 500. It's one of the smallest.
Medals are medals.
But medals are well. I'm thinking whether we have ever had an Olympic medal from bobsleigh. But through my life, I don't think we have ever won a single medal from bobsleigh, but we are happy if we can get there. But so I would like, this wouldn't be like too precise, just saying only as an importance or recognition, because I couldn't measure recognition. I have just significance based on the success and on some quantifiable measures, which was produced by ministry. And I have just the variable Olympic and non-Olympic sport, which is like half to half of the population I studied. And but generally it's like, if they received, which we can like really correlate is subsidize, how much subsidize they received. And it's clear, more subsidized, the less transparent.
It's the same everywhere.
And well, generally, if I should, so why is that? And it's about conditions. It's about what the state wanted from the organization. It wasn't obligatory, like in law, it was obligatory to publish that in the public registry. But well, there were no sanctions, so they were enforced. And it wasn't a condition of the public subsidies. If it was such, for example, in the UK, it would be a reverse. So generally, the subsidize itself is, or anything organizational itself, is not a determinant. The determinant is the requirement of the institutions. So institutional forces play much more significant role. And I also found, and this was like another set of determinants in qualitative part of the research, and these are attitudinal and also knowledge-based. I will explain them later on. So this, like, I found 3 new attitudinal and knowledge-based determinants. Generally, what I was flattered, like this year, there was a new paper in Journal of Global Sports Management that, like, this was one of the latest studies in transparency, so there's still need for further studies in transparency. One of the studies made by Merconici et al. And for me, it was a springboard where just inherited. Like, there was a long tenure of the procedure, and he or she just learned an ancestor. So generally, the knowledge was passed by as a culture, as a law, not as an education or anything. So this was like one. And uncertainty, like they weren't sure what is right, what is wrong. Like I faced replies, I cannot provide you with this, why? Or generally like claiming that the data are confidential unless they should have been reported publicly. So what I did in my latest research with Andrew Schnackenberg was like we did a large study conceptually, and we moved from most of also the problem of the table I showed was that it was a unidimensional just disclosure score, which doesn't reflect all the 3 dimensions. It's just the disclosure. Also, a level of analysis. I realized that it's more what comes from society and also from the individuals. So generally, we need to implement all the levels of analysis. And also, the effect of individual determinants is not linear. And most of them used regression models and I also used regression models in my first study. And I thought, well, it's more about combination, like about interplay of like how institution and individual conditions just align or are in contrast. So what we developed, that there are generally 3 major forces that influence transparency. And first is institutional forces. And these are formal requirements for the transparency. This is, for example, laws, but also codes of governance. And this is one of the factors that influence, but not only in a positive way, and I will show you how. And then an important factor is, I originally called it societal maturity, but the reviewers didn't like it, so now it's societal forces, and it's just the expectation and rewarding of transparency. Like I say, in Russia, transparency is not rewarded, it's a sign of weakness. However, in the US, if you are not transparent, you can be punished. And it's not only at the level of countries, it's the level of industries, it's the level of society. So it's not just general country level. And the third, which is least explored, is leadership forces. It means how leadership are educated and inclined towards transparency, how they are even like ethically behaving in their life and in their career. So what we did is the final model, which is based on configurational approach. So just the black dot, full dot, means the condition is there, the condition is met. The cross, on the other hand, means the condition is absent, or is reverse, or is negative. And if it's empty, it doesn't matter. So if I should, and these generates 5 regimes of transparency based on, you can see that disclosure, accuracy, and clarity could be assessed, and how these 3 forces are combined. And if we have like absent institutional forces, there are no requirements, and combined with low leadership forces, certainly there is no disclosure. This is the level of organization in countries where transparency doesn't matter. There could be also deceptive, because one way of how we can ensure transparency, okay, let's make a law. But what happens if we make a law on disclosure? Well, they will disclose. But if the leadership is opposed, I don't want to disclose anything. I will do anything. How can I screw the information? So I will either screw accuracy, just fake numbers, or just I will make it so ununderstandable that no one will understand. And I'll be clear. Okay, I did what I'm supposed to. So this is deceptive, and it means only forcing organization to transparency doesn't mean we will get more transparency. We will get disclosure, but not the full transparency. The other way around could be, and that's for the example of Russia, of some organization in Russia, for example, or even like some people who try to do more, is the leaders are inclined because like I come from US, Australia, I come to Serbia, and I think, well, I'm ethical person and I want to disclose everything. However, so I disclose it in accurate manner, I disclose it, but people will start, okay, well, why this company disclosed that, and how can we misuse that? Okay, it's even could be like in some institutional requirement, it could be misused by the competitors, or even for blackmailing or greenmailing. So it could be even misused when the societal forces are not ready for transparency. So the societal forces are also important, because if the societal hits with the leadership forces, it will have negative outcomes for the organization. Or a little bit reverse way, when the societal forces are ready, so regardless, or even if we don't have any official rules on transparency, but society is ready and leaders are ready, they will write what they saw, because they disclose that it's in a covered manner, and the stakeholders start, okay, well, they report something we are not used to, but that's good, so we trust them, we spend there more. So generally it's like a pioneering transparency, and what happens in time, if it goes well, the other competitors try to emulate and try to disclose as well. And the last thing is, we call it like vanguard transparency. It's like an ultimate state which we would like that society is ready, the institutional forces are requiring what they want, and generally we will reach disclosure, accuracy, and clarity. So that's the main thing. Is the final state of transparency depends on the interplay of institutional forces, societal forces, or societal maturity, and the leadership forces. So if I get to the last slide, which is policy implications. So generally, like an ideal way is not only in regulation, but including in education. In education, what is transparency, why it is needed, why it is good for the organization, and also in leadership development, it's good. One of the rules I didn't have here, but for example, for international and non-profit organization, I would also recommend even just checking the moral profile of the leaders. Because if the morality and ethical standards are low, it's very probable that the leader will be low in expectation of transparency. Also, this one builds disclosure mostly, but generally conditioning of public fundings, because it wasn't necessary. And then once it had changed afterwards in our country, my results wouldn't be valid anymore, because at least for the disclosure, from like 4 years ago, it has changed, and it's obligatory. If you apply for state funding, you must have a full public register of the documents that are required. So now it's no matter of choice, so they have to. Also, what helps is codes of good governance. Generally, common law countries which are keen on codes of good governance show higher levels of good governance principles, despite the affairs which we have seen. Also, it's about assessment of transparency. I would say right now I'm doubtful about any study that just take any disclosure score, even ESG scores or anything, because like ESG scores is just the ESG disclosure. But does it mean that the disclosure is clear and accurate? So, and that means like it's very easy to measure disclosure. It's very difficult to measure clarity and more difficult to measure accuracy, but we have to find ways and develop ways how to measure all, and either positive, proactive, or some recursive way like punishing. And also, generally, also transparency is expensive. It's not for free because it requires a lot of effort for the organization. It's not just like we say and the organization can do, because it requires knowledge, it requires workforce, it requires data availability. So there must be also a support for organizations that they could be transparent, and also alignment of the norms with the societal expectation. You cannot overkill. So that's what I prepared for you. Thank you for the invitation. I think that I was like maybe 5 minutes over the 45 minutes, so thank you for your patience.